If you're someone who's always wanted to be able to run and you've been watching things like the London Marathon at the weekend wishing that was you, then keep watching this video because I'm going to give you tips that you're going to need to start running properly for the very first time. Now, the point of this video is that you need to understand that you could have the best running program in the world, but if you don't execute the principles I'm going to talk about effectively, then it doesn't matter, it's going to fail and you're going to hate running and you're never going to get anywhere. Now, we're going to go straight into it now with maybe the most important tip of all, and that is following the 10% rule. Now, the 10% rule refers to your training volume, so how many miles or kilometers you run per week. And this essentially dictates that you should be not increasing your volume by more than 10% each week. So practically, this will look like if I run 20 kilometers last week, 10% of 20 is 2, and therefore I'm not going to run more than 22 kilometers the following week instead of doing 25 or 30 like most people would. Now, the reason for this is because the science around this rule actually indicates that this is the best way to minimize the risk of getting injuries, because running is a very repetitive sport. You know, it's one movement. You're constantly just repeating your stride constantly on usually concrete, which is high impact anyway, which means little injuries can rear their heads, and after a while they can just become things that become chronic problems. So this is to reduce the risk of that, and also make sure that you have enough time to recover and you don't overtrain, which is absolutely something that you want to be avoiding. Now, tip number 2 is one that a lot of runners, especially at the start of their running, really neglect, and that is the importance of footwear. Now, there's many reasons why a shoe like this is better than a shoe that you're going to be wearing to the gym or out and about when it comes to running, because obviously it's designed for running as opposed to your standard shoe. But what does it actually mean, and what are the actual differences between your standard shoes and your running shoes? Well, running shoes, for example, are more cushioned, and they have different types of cushioning depending on what you want. So let's say you want a really soft feel, like you're running on clouds. There's shoes that do that, they've got more cushioning. Or maybe you want a firmer feel. You can do that from a shoe like this. But doesn't matter what type of cushioning you have, it's going to be better at absorbing the impact than your standard shoes. And absorbing impact is important because I've already mentioned that running is a very repetitive sport. And if we can absorb impact more efficiently, we reduce the risk of any injuries, and we can also propel ourselves forward easier, which is obviously a win. Now, some people will do what we call overpronating, which is where you're going to roll in at the ankle, and some of you won't. But it doesn't matter again, because you can get running shoes on whether you do this or not, and it's very easy to tell. You can get yourself on a treadmill, see if you roll in or not on a slow motion camera, and it's pretty obvious. A little bit's fine, but if your ankle's nearly touching the treadmill, you might have a problem, because it's only going to be worse on the road because it's higher impact. All of these things are not taken into account from your normal shoes. Now, for example, something that's common in CrossFit is them to run in Metcons, which are really hard for lifting. These are as bad running shoes as you could ever get, because the impact is going to be exacerbated even further because there's barely any cushioning in there at all to actually absorb anything. That's how things like shin splints occur. Now, the best thing about all of this is that you used to be able to have to spend 150 quid to get a good pair of running shoes. Nowadays, you can get last year's models for 70 or 80 quid, which, in my opinion, for something you're going to get 6 months to a year minimum out of, and this is absolute minimum if you run a lot, I think that's a really good deal, especially if it gives you peace of mind when it comes to avoiding the risk of injury. Now, my next tip is the sort of thing that would tell children, but it goes to us adults as well, and that is set realistic goals. Because you need to remember, if you're starting from nothing, like not having run a 5K before, you entering the London Marathon for next year is potentially problematic. Could you get away with it? Yes, but you're putting so much pressure on yourself, and I always find it's better to take the pressure away when you're starting out and actually find out if running is for you, because whilst running is really trendy and popular now, it's not for everyone, and a lot of people will hate it. And if you hate something, unless it's your job, I don't see any reason to be doing it. So set a realistic goal. If you haven't run 5K before, go from there, and guess what? There's easy progressions in running because the distance just gets a bit bigger. Go 5K, 10K, half marathon. You can even go in between, marathon, whatever, okay? Or you can do a 5K and then try and get a 5K PB, okay? Just set realistic goals. If you've never run before, trying to run a sub 25K in 5 weeks is probably going to be too much. So just take a step back, take the emotion out of it, and just think, right, what is actually a realistic goal? Now, something else that's important when it comes to running, especially just starting out, is, well, it's 2 things. It's tracking and it's accountability. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, you can sort of tick this off in one box, really. And this is where apps like your Stravas and your Nike Run Clubs are actually going to come in, because you're going to be able to see data based on how you're running. So you're going to know running paces, things like that. You're going to log, and you're going to see other people logging workouts too, which will just make you a little bit more motivated, hold you a little bit more accountable, because you're going to see your friends doing their runs, so therefore you might want to do yours. And tracking is just so important as well, because you can see your performance over time. If it's going well, you're like, great, I need to almost keep doing what I'm doing because I'm seeing the progress, my plan is working. And if you're not seeing progress over, say, a 2 or 3 month period, then maybe it's an indicator that you should be changing something. So either way, using apps like Strava, Nike Run Club, or even just Apple Health or whatever, Garmin Connect, whatever it can be for data and just looking at other people running, it can be really good both from an accountability point of view and actually measuring your progress, because we can't really control what we can't measure. All right, so this next principle is definitely one of the least sexy things you can talk about when it comes to running or sport in general, and that is recovery. And I'll be honest, no one likes talking about it, but it is as important as your training. Make no mistake about it, because if you start overtraining and you do too much, you're not going to be able to recover, you're going to get injured, then you might end up stopping running completely, which is the result that no one wants. And recovery isn't just what you think it is. It's not just rest. Obviously, you should have at least 1 rest day a week. If you're starting out, I reckon you should have probably 3 rest days a week, to be honest, from running, just because your body's not going to be used to that sort of volume. And there's a couple of things that our body reacts to, which gives us things like your muscle soreness or the potential for little niggly injuries, and that is an increase in volume or doing an activity you haven't done before. Now, if you haven't done much running before, you're going to tick both of these boxes, which means your body is going to react by telling you that you're very sore, and you're going to feel sore initially, which means you're going to want to manage your running a little bit at the start and make sure you're recovered more. Now, there's other ways we can be recovered. The number one way is getting your protein in. Again, it's boring, but make sure you're eating enough protein. We know how much protein you should be having by now. It's between 1.5 and 2.2 grams per kilo of body weight. Hydration is also really important. This is where things like electrolytes will come in, because not only is staying well hydrated actually going to make your running better, it's also going to make your health better. So therefore, it's just a win-win. Never neglect hydration. I know a lot of people will go a day, maybe drinking 1 glass of water. I'll be honest with you, we're adults, we can do better than that. You need to be doing better, especially from a recovery point of view, and also making sure you're eating enough calories and good quality food is always going to help you as well. Okay, so these were my main tips that I'd focus on if I was starting running for the very first time again, but I'm actually going to leave you with a bonus, and that is the most important of anything actually. Don't compare yourself to someone that you see on Strava or you see running past you in the park or anything like that, because 9 times out of 10, you're not going to know their backstory. That person could have been running for 20 years. If you started last week, it's just not a fair comparison, and all that's going to do is demotivate you and make it more likely that you're going to stop running. So if you're going to compare yourself to anyone, compare to yourself a few months ago from when you'd either just started to your few months in, okay? Now, I'll be honest, it can be really difficult to know how to just get going in the first place. So I'm just going to drop a free Couch to 5K program in the link in the description. There's no catch, just click the link, screenshot it, download it, whatever you want to do. I've got more running content on this channel, so if you're specifically looking at your 5K, I strongly suggest you watch this video right here. But if not, then don't worry, I hope you all have a lovely day.